3 weeks after I moved in, the sudden screech of tires against gravel shattered the quiet of my Colorado driveway. I looked up to see a sleek black SUV slide to a stop, kicking up tiny clouds of dust and pebbles. The doors swung open with exaggerated precision, and 4 strangers stepped out, each bearing the cold authority of corporate enforcers. HOA logos blazed across their jackets like battle insignias, and the papers in their hands, official-looking, stamped, sealed, were a $50,000 fine notice. Their eyes cut through me, as if I'd just stolen the crown jewels from their precious little community, all because I dared to buy the patch of land they had been scheming to claim for years. "Pay up or get out," one of them smirked, the sentence sliding across the gravel like a challenge I wasn't supposed to refuse. I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. Instead, I gave a calm, knowing smile. They'd chosen the wrong man to intimidate, and this fight wasn't going to happen in some stuffy HOA meeting room with canned coffee and forced civility. No, this battle would be fought right here, on my land, under the sun, where I could control every inch. And trust me, you want to guess who's going to win? Music. But let's rewind 3 weeks to see how I ended up facing this absurd corporate assault. My name is Ethan Cole. Until recently, I was designing sustainable, eco-friendly buildings in the heart of Seattle's tech corridor. Life was busy, draining, and despite its demands, I had a routine. That routine shattered 6 months ago when Emily, my wife of 12 years, finally lost her long battle with cancer. The city that had once felt like home turned gray and lifeless. Rain-streaked glass buildings became reminders of hospital corridors, chemotherapy sessions, and a life paused by grief. Emily had always dreamed of a cabin by a lake, a quiet place, where we could watch the sun set over gold-tinged waters and grow old together. After she was gone, I knew that building that cabin wasn't just a dream. It was the last promise I could fulfill for her, the final tribute to a love that had shaped my life. When I stumbled upon 2.5 acres of untouched lakefront property in Colorado, priced at a jaw-dropping $180,000, roughly half its market value, I should have been suspicious. The seller explained that the land had been pulled from development plans, making it off the market and perfect for a private retreat. I told myself I was lucky, that maybe life had given me one break after 12 months of tragedy. The property was breathtaking. Towering pines framed a gentle slope down to Clearwater Lake, where morning mist hovered over water so transparent I could see trout gliding 20 feet beneath the surface. I began sketching the plans for an eco-cabin that would honor Emily's dream: solar panels, rainwater collection, geothermal heating, an architectural ode to her spirit. I moved into a small construction trailer on the land, working by day on drawings and watching wildlife by evening. For 3 pure, blissful days, I believed I had found peace. Then they came. The HOA arrived like a swarm of locusts dressed in designer suits. At the helm was Clarissa Wynn, whose blonde hair was perfectly sculpted into a helmet that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She carried herself with the quiet arrogance of someone who always got what she wanted, and her smile was as warm as a corporate restructuring memo. The 3 men at her side looked like interchangeable intimidation units, each one radiating the same bland menace. Clarissa brandished a thick, official-looking document, stamped and sealed as if the UN itself had sanctioned it. "Mr. Cole," she began, that false saccharine sweetness designed to unsettle. "This violation notice is for disrupting our 5-year community development plan. The Panerai HOA has determined that your unauthorized construction activities require immediate remediation." I took the document in hand, reading it with the same scrutiny I would give a structural engineering report. $50,000 in environmental impact fees and community planning adjustment costs. According to their paperwork, I was required to join an HOA that had no legal authority over my land. I kept my voice calm, even amused. "That's fascinating," I said, gesturing to the lake where ducks glided by, oblivious to the bureaucratic charade. "I spent significant time researching property records before purchase. This land sits outside your jurisdiction. You have no legal authority to impose fees on property you don't govern." Clarissa's smile never faltered, but I caught the glint of cold calculation in her eyes. "Boundaries can be adjusted when community interests are at stake, Mr. Cole. We are simply maintaining the character and value of our neighborhood." For the next 20 minutes, she volleyed increasingly creative legal arguments, while I pointed out every flaw, every assumption, every lack of documentation. She claimed the HOA had voted to expand jurisdiction to environmentally sensitive areas around the lake. When I requested proof, she waved it off, saying it was pending in county offices. Her three companions said nothing, their silence, a weapon as potent as any paperwork. It became clear that this wasn't a group of neighbors worried about property values. This was an organization with teeth, trained in intimidation and legal theater. As Clarissa prepared to leave, she slid a business card toward me. "You have 48 hours to review your options, Mr. Cole. After that, we will pursue stronger measures to protect the community's interests." She walked with the unshakable confidence of a professional accustomed to winning, her team following in silent obedience. One man lingered a second longer, his glare sharp, menacing, but polished, corporate-ready menace. When the SUV disappeared, down the road, I noticed a new threat. A drone hovering overhead, its camera locked on my property. Someone was documenting me, watching my every move. My gut tightened as I realized this was far from over. It was just the opening move of a larger calculated battle. Standing in the Colorado sunlight, Emily's dream property spreading out before me, I understood my choices. I could pay, pack up, and retreat to Seattle, or I could fight. And I would fight, using every skill I had honed in 15 years navigating. Building codes, zoning laws, and municipal bureaucracy, I would make them regret targeting me. The drone buzzed above, a mechanical vulture circling the wrong prey. And for the first time since Emily's illness, I felt purpose. My quiet life as an engineer had equipped me for this fight in ways they could never anticipate. Back in Seattle, I had developed autonomous drones for forest monitoring, equipped with AI cameras that detected environmental changes from hundreds of feet above. I still had 3 of those drones, plus high-resolution recording gear enough to film a small war. By Tuesday, I had deployed a full surveillance network. Motion-triggered cameras at every entrance, thermal sensors capable of detecting humans within 100 yards. By Wednesday, I was ready for my first real counterattack. I drafted a cease and desist letter, meticulous in format, citing Colorado statutes, demanding the HOA stop harassment and provide legitimate legal documents for any claims within 72 hours. I hand-delivered copies to Clarissa's office and mailed certified letters to their registered address, ensuring a paper trail admissible in court. The receptionist's wide-eyed surprise at my professional approach told me I had unsettled them already. The HOA's response arrived faster than expected, but not as I anticipated. Instead of documents, I received a menacing letter on official letterhead, claiming to be from the Urban Planning Department. It demanded an immediate $5,000 environmental assessment fee for unauthorized construction and threatened to freeze my accounts and place liens on my property if I failed to comply within 10 business days. Everything about the letter screamed legitimacy, embossed seals, watermarks, formal legal language. But when I called the county planning office directly, they'd never heard of any such assessment and had no record of violations on my property. While I was dealing with their fake government documents, my drone surveillance system was collecting some very interesting footage. Clarissa herself had made 3 separate visits to my property when she thought I wasn't around, photographing the land from multiple angles and taking detailed notes in a leather-bound journal. The high-resolution cameras captured her measuring distances from the shoreline and marking specific coordinates on what appeared to be a survey map. She wasn't just harassing me randomly. This was a carefully planned operation, and she was gathering intelligence for some larger purpose that I couldn't quite grasp yet. My counterattack launched that Friday evening when I uploaded a 15-minute video to YouTube titled HOA Threatens Me with Fake $150 Kelvin Fine. Here's the proof. The footage showed Clarissa's entire intimidation visit, complete with close-ups of their fraudulent violation notice and audio of her bogus legal claims. I narrated the video like a technical documentary, calmly explaining property law and pointing out each illegal aspect of their behavior. Within 6 hours, the video had garnered 50,000 views. By Sunday morning, it had exploded to 2.8 million views with over 40,000 comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. The response was overwhelming and exactly what I'd hoped for. Legal professionals in the comments section confirmed that the HOA had no authority to find property outside their boundaries. Several viewers identified similar fake documents they'd received from overzealous HOAs in other states. Most importantly, the video caught the attention of investigative journalists and legal advocacy groups who specialized in HOA abuse cases. My phone started ringing with offers of pro bono legal assistance and requests for interviews. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had real allies instead of just my engineering degree and righteous indignation. But Clarissa wasn't going to go down without a fight. Late Sunday evening, I received an anonymous message through a burner email account that made me blood run cold. "Be careful," the message read. "Clarissa has a dark past in Texas. She did the same thing to a veteran there, but it ended much worse for him. She's not just some power-hungry HOA president. She's done this before, and she knows how to make people disappear from their properties." The message included a link to a PDF file containing what appeared to be court documents from Austin, Texas, dating back 3 years. Before I could download the file completely, the entire email account vanished as if it had never existed. Standing in my trailer that night, staring at the partial legal document on my laptop screen, I realized this was bigger than just some local HO overreach. Clarissa Wynn had a history, and if the anonymous tip was accurate, I wasn't her first victim. The question that kept me awake until dawn was simple. What had happened to the veteran in Texas? And was I about to find out firsthand? Monday morning brought a new level of psychological warfare that I hadn't seen coming. Clarissa had clearly learned from my viral video success and decided to fight fire with fire, except their fire was made of lies and sophisticated technology. I woke up to 17 missed calls and a barrage of angry text messages from neighbors I'd never met, all claiming I was a liar and a troublemaker who was destroying their community's reputation. When I checked social media, I discovered the source of their rage. A professionally produced video had appeared on the Pine Ridge community Facebook page, showing what appeared to be me standing in a community meeting, voluntarily agreeing to join the HOA and pay all associated fees. The video was disturbingly convincing. The person speaking looked exactly like me, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident. The voice matched my speech patterns and regional accent perfectly. In the footage, I appeared calm and reasonable as I explained to a room full of concerned citizens why I decided to embrace community cooperation over individual property rights. The deep fake version of me even referenced specific details about my background in sustainable engineering and my late wife Emily's love of lakefront properties. Whoever had created this digital forgery had done their homework with frightening thoroughness. The community response was swift and brutal. My morning coffee was interrupted by 3 separate visits from angry neighbors demanding to know why I was lying on the internet when I had clearly agreed to follow HOA rules at their community meeting. Mrs. Patterson from down the road accused me of trying to destroy property values with my fake victim story. Bob Jenkins, who owned the hardware store in town, refused to sell me construction supplies and suggested I find somewhere else to shop until I got my story straight. The social isolation was immediate and effective. Within 24 hours, I'd gone from having the community's sympathy to being treated like a pariah who couldn't be trusted. The stress was getting to me in ways I hadn't expected. Sitting alone in my trailer that evening, staring at the deep fake video for the 100th time, I started questioning my own memory of events. The digital version of me was so convincing that part of my brain wondered if I'd somehow forgotten attending a community meeting. Emily had always been my anchor during difficult times, the voice of reason who could cut through confusion and help me see clearly without her steady presence. I found myself doubting everything and considering the unthinkable option of just paying the fine and walking away from our dream property. That's when I remembered Emily's last coherent conversation before the morphine took away her clarity. "Don't let anyone steal your dreams, Ethan," she'd whispered while squeezing my hand with what little strength remained. "Promise me you'll fight for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Looking at her photograph on my laptop screen, I felt my resolve crystallize into something harder than a diamond. Clarissa might have sophisticated technology and community manipulation tactics, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how far a man would go to keep a promise to his dying wife. My salvation came through an old friendship that I'd almost forgotten about. Marcus Reed had been my roommate during graduate school at the University of Washington. Back when we were both young idealists who thought technology could solve the world's problems, Marcus had gone on to specialize in AI forensics for federal law enforcement, developing systems to detect deep fakes and other forms of digital deception. When I called him that Tuesday evening, explaining my situation in desperate detail, his response was immediate and reassuring. "Send me everything you've got, Ethan. If someone's using deepfake technology to destroy your reputation, I'll find the digital fingerprints they left behind." Marcus worked his magic with the kind of precision that reminded me why he'd graduated summa laude from our computer science program. Within 48 hours, he dissected the deepfake video down to its component pixels and discovered multiple smoking guns that proved its artificial nature. The metadata showed inconsistent compression algorithms that indicated digital manipulation. More damning, the timestamp data revealed the video had been created 3 full days before the community meeting supposedly took place. The lighting analysis showed digital artifacts around my face where the deepfake software had struggled to match natural shadows. Marcus compiled his findings into a comprehensive technical report that would hold up in federal court. Armed with professional forensic analysis, I prepared to file a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's Office for criminal impersonation and digital fraud. But first, I wanted to give Clarissa one final opportunity to back down gracefully. I called her office and requested a face-to-face meeting to discuss our misunderstanding about community boundaries. Her assistant scheduled us for Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m., probably expecting me to arrive with a white flag and a checkbook. Instead, I showed up with Marcus's forensic report and a portable recorder to document whatever lies she planned to tell next. The meeting took place in Clarissa's pristine office, which looked more like a corporate boardroom than a community organization headquarters. Expensive artwork covered the walls, and her desk was larger than most people's dining room tables. She greeted me with the same fake smile I'd come to despise, but I could see tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there during our first encounter. "Mr. Cole," she began with artificial warmth, "I hope you've had time to reconsider your position on community cooperation." I placed Marcus's forensic report on her desk and watched her face carefully as she realized what she was looking at. "Actually, Clarissa, I think it's time we discussed your position on federal crimes like deepfake fraud and criminal impersonation." The color drained from her face as she scanned the technical analysis, but her recovery was impressively quick. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, though her voice had lost its confident edge. "Our community meeting was properly recorded and documented. If you have concerns about the footage, perhaps you should speak with our technology consultant." She was good. I had to give her that, even caught red-handed with digital forensics. She was still trying to maintain plausible deniability, but I noticed her hands were trembling slightly as she closed the report folder. And when I mentioned my plan to forward everything to federal authorities, something that looked very much like fear flickered across her perfectly composed features. As I prepared to leave her office, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number with a digitally altered voice. "Stop right now or your friend's sister will face some very serious financial problems," the robotic voice warned before. The line went dead. Marcus had mentioned his sister Jenny during our conversation about his forensic analysis, how she was struggling as a single mother after losing her home to another HOA dispute. The message was crystal clear. Clarissa wasn't just fighting me anymore. She was threatening the people I cared about, which meant this war was about to get very personal indeed. Thursday morning, I woke up to discover that Clarissa had escalated, from digital deception to outright government impersonation. A checkpoint had been erected overnight at the entrance to my property, complete with official-looking signage that read Colorado State Building Safety Division, environmental assessment required. 2 men in matching uniforms stood beside a fold-out, table covered with clipboards and official-looking documents. They wore badge lanyards and carried themselves with the kind of bureaucratic authority that most people wouldn't question. When I approached on foot to investigate, they informed me that all entry and exit from my property now required a mandatory safety inspection and a $5,000 processing fee. The setup was impressively convincing at first glance, but my engineering background had taught me to look for details that others might miss. The uniforms were good quality, but had small inconsistencies in the state seal embroidery. The official documents contained several spelling errors that no government agency would let slip through. Most tellingly, when I asked to see their state identification cards, they produced laminated badges that looked like they'd been printed on a home office printer. I spent 10 minutes taking photos of everything while pretending to review their paperwork, documenting what was clearly an elaborate fraud designed to look like legitimate government oversight. My phone call to the actual Colorado Department of Public Safety confirmed what I already suspected. No such division as the Colorado State Building Safety Division existed within their organizational structure. No environmental assessments had been ordered for my property, and no fees were required for construction activities on privately owned land outside municipal boundaries. The real officials were very interested in my photographs of the fake checkpoint and asked me to file a formal complaint about government impersonation, which carries serious federal penalties. I was more than happy to oblige, especially since I now had clear evidence of criminal activity that went far beyond simple HOA overreach. Armed with this information, I decided to take a more aggressive legal approach. I filed a comprehensive complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's office, documenting the fake fines, the deepfake fraud, and now the government impersonation scheme. Each of these activities constituted separate felony charges under both state and federal law. The Attorney General's office took my complaint seriously enough to assign it to their white-collar crime division and promised a full investigation within 2 weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had real legal authority backing my position instead of just righteous indignation in YouTube videos. But the fake checkpoint was just the beginning of Clarissa's psychological warfare campaign. Over the weekend, my utilities started experiencing mysterious problems. The electricity would flicker off for hours at a time, always during peak work periods when I was trying to complete architectural drawings on my laptop. The internet service became so unreliable that I couldn't maintain video calls with potential clients back in Seattle. When I contacted the utility companies, they claimed to have received official requests to temporarily suspend service pending environmental compliance review. Each company had been contacted by someone claiming to represent state environmental authorities using official-sounding reference numbers and case file identifiers. The personal nature of these attacks hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about property boundaries or HOA politics anymore. Clarissa was systematically dismantling the infrastructure I needed to rebuild my life after Emily's death. The cabin project wasn't just about fulfilling a promise to my wife, it was about creating a place where I could process my grief and find some sense of purpose again. Emily had specifically chosen this lakefront property from dozens of online listings, spending hours researching soil conditions and sun exposure patterns to make sure it would be perfect for the sustainable home we dreamed about for years. Knowing that someone was trying to steal that dream felt like losing Emily all over again. My investigation into Clarissa's background took an interesting turn when I discovered her connection to a major development company. Public records showed that Pinnacle Development had filed preliminary applications to build a luxury resort on 50 acres of lakefront property, including the exact parcel I'd purchased. The timeline was revealing. Pinnacle had submitted their initial proposal 6 months before my land went up for sale at below-market prices. Clarissa wasn't listed as an employee of Pinnacle, but she was registered as their community relations director, with an annual salary of $300,000. Suddenly, her desperate attempts to remove me from the property made perfect sense. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a highly paid operative working to clear land for a massive commercial development. The personal stakes became crystal clear that Sunday evening when I found a handwritten note taped to my trailer door. The message was brief but chilling. Some dreams are too expensive to keep. Smart people know when to walk away. You have 48 hours to make the smart choice. The note was signed with a simple C in elegant script that matched Clarissa's handwriting from the documents I'd seen in her office. This wasn't just a business dispute anymore. It was a direct threat against my personal safety and my right to honor Emily's memory by building the home she'd always wanted. That night, as I sat in my trailer reviewing architectural plans by the light of a battery-powered lantern, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be intimidated by fake government officials, utility sabotage, or thinly veiled threats. Emily had faced cancer with more courage than Clarissa could ever muster, and I wasn't about to dishonor her memory by running away from a fight. If Clarissa wanted to play hardball with utility companies and development schemes, she was about to learn that engineers know how to build things and tear them down with equal precision. The war was escalating, but I was ready for whatever came next. Around midnight, the smell of smoke drifting through my trailer windows told me that whatever came next was going to arrive much sooner than I'd anticipated. The smoke wasn't coming from a wildfire or an accident. My storage shed was engulfed in flames that burned too evenly and too hot to be anything but arson. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from my trailer and ran toward the blaze, but it was all ready. Too late to save the construction materials I'd been stockpiling for the cabin project. What I could save was evidence. The thermal imaging cameras and motion sensors I'd installed around the property had been recording everything, including the person who'd set the fire. As I watched my building materials turn to ash, I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that whoever did this had just handed me the smoking gun I needed to destroy them legally. The footage was even better than I'd hoped. My infrared cameras had captured a figure approaching the shed at 11:47 p.m., carrying what appeared to be a gas can and wearing a baseball cap pulled low to obscure facial features. But thermal imaging doesn't lie about body heat signatures, and the high-definition footage showed enough physical characteristics to make an identification. More importantly, the person had been careless about their escape route. As they hurried away from the burning shed, they passed directly under one of my standard cameras, giving me a crystal-clear shot of their profile. The arsonist was Robert Wynn, Clarissa's husband, and a quick background check revealed he had 2 prior convictions for property destruction in Colorado and Nevada. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. Special Agent Victoria Hayes from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division had received my complaint about government impersonation and wanted to meet in person. Federal agencies don't typically respond that quickly to individual complaints unless there's a larger investigation already in progress. Agent Hayes arrived at my property within hours, driving an unmarked sedan and carrying a briefcase full of documents that made my head spin. She explained that the FBI had been monitoring Pinnacle Development for 8 months as part of a multi-state investigation into money laundering through fraudulent real estate development schemes. My case against Clarissa had provided the final pieces of evidence they needed to move forward with federal charges. The government impersonation scheme had crossed state lines when Clarissa used fake federal environmental regulations to justify her fake checkpoint. The deepfake fraud involved wire communications across multiple states, making it a federal crime. Most importantly, the pattern of forcing property owners to sell below market value to clear land for Pinnacle's developments had been repeated in at least 6 other states over the past 5 years. I wasn't Clarissa's first victim. I was just the first one who'd fought back with enough technical expertise to document everything properly. Agent Hayes shared information that made my blood run cold. Clarissa's real name was Claire Watson, and she'd been operating under multiple identities for nearly a decade. Her most recent previous identity had been in Austin, Texas, where she'd served as president of the Riverside Oaks HOA. The pattern was identical. Identify properties needed for large-scale development, use fraudulent HOA powers to harass owners into selling, then disappear before any serious legal consequences could catch up with her. The Texas operation had been particularly cruel. She targeted Tom Bradley, an Afghanistan veteran with PTSD, forcing him to sell his family home for $30,000 below market value to pay fabricated HOA fines totaling $45,000. The personal connection hit me like a physical blow when Agent Hayes revealed that Tom Bradley wasn't some random victim from Texas. He was Marcus Reed's brother-in-law, married to Marcus's sister, Jenny Miller. Jenny had lost her home to the same Riverside Oaks HOA scheme 3 years earlier when Clarissa convinced the community that Jenny's mobile home was detrimental to property values and imposed escalating fines until she had no choice but to sell. The HOA had then immediately rezoned the area for high-density development, selling Jenny's former lot to Pinnacle Development for 3 times what she'd been forced to accept. Marcus had never connected his sister's troubles to my current situation because Clarissa had been operating under a different name in Texas. This revelation transformed everything from a personal property dispute into something much larger and more urgent. Clarissa wasn't just trying to steal my land. She was part of a sophisticated criminal organization that had been systematically destroying families across multiple states for years. Jenny Miller was a single mother working as a nurse's aide, struggling to support 2 children after losing her home to Clarissa's fraudulent schemes. Tom Bradley had never recovered from losing the property his grandfather had left him, developing severe depression that had cost him his marriage and his relationship with his children. 12 other families had been similarly destroyed by Clarissa's operations in Texas, Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona. Agent Hayes explained that the FBI needed my cooperation for a sting operation that would expose the entire Pinnacle Development network. They wanted me to pretend to surrender and agree to sell my property while wearing recording equipment that would capture Clarissa's confession of her various crimes. The plan was risky because Clarissa had already shown a willingness to use violence through her husband's arson activities. But it was also our best chance to gather the evidence needed to put her away for decades and recover stolen money for her previous victims. The stakes couldn't have been higher. FBI forensic accountants had traced over $50 million in fraudulent real estate transactions connected to Clarissa's various identities and Pinnacle Development's shell companies. The money had been laundered through offshore accounts and fake construction companies, making it nearly impossible to recover through normal legal channels. If our sting operation succeeded, the FBI could freeze those accounts and return millions of dollars to families who'd lost their homes and life savings to Clarissa's schemes. That evening, as I prepared for the most dangerous gamble of my life, I received an anonymous email containing documents that made everything even more complicated. Someone had leaked Pinnacle Development's complete master plan, showing their intention to clear not just my property but an entire 50-acre section of Clearwater Lake shoreline. The plan called for displacing 23 families to build a luxury resort with 200 villa units, a championship golf course, and a private marina. The projected profits were staggering. Over $75 million in the first phase alone, with Clarissa earning a $3 million bonus for community acquisition services if she could clear all the properties within 18 months. Looking at Emily's photograph that night, I made a promise that felt as sacred as any wedding vow. This wasn't just about our dream cabin anymore. It was about stopping a criminal organization that had destroyed dozens of families and was planning to destroy dozens more. Clarissa had made one crucial mistake in her years off-road and intimidation. She'd picked a fight with someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Tomorrow, I would walk into her trap wearing an FBI wire, and either I would emerge victorious, or Clarissa would discover that some people are willing to risk everything to protect the dreams of the people they love. The FBI's sting operation required me to become an actor in the most important performance of my life. Agent Hayes spent Tuesday morning fitting me with recording equipment so sophisticated it seemed like science fiction. A microtransmitter, bigger than a shirt button, was sewn into my collar, while a backup recording device was hidden inside a modified pen that I would carry in my shirt pocket. The audio quality was crystal clear when we tested the system, capable of picking up whispered conversations from across a room. Agent Hayes explained that everything would be monitored in real time by a tactical team positioned within half a mile of my property, ready to intervene if the situation turned dangerous. The plan was deceptively simple. I would call Clarissa and request an urgent meeting to discuss surrendering and selling my property to end our conflict. The FBI wanted me to appear defeated and desperate. Someone who'd finally been worn down by months of harassment and legal threats. Agent Hayes coached me on specific phrases that would encourage Clarissa to incriminate herself. Questions about the HOA's legal authority and Pinnacle Development's involvement that would prompt her to explain their criminal scheme in detail. The goal was together talking about the money laundering, the fraudulent documents, and the pattern of property theft that had been destroying families across multiple states. Wednesday afternoon, I made the call that would either end Clarissa's criminal career or potentially cost me my life. Her assistant put me through immediately, which told me she'd been expecting contact and was probably eager to claim victory. "Clarissa, this is Ethan Cole," I said, injecting just the right amount of exhaustion into my voice. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about resolving our differences. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand, and I'm ready to discuss reasonable terms for selling my property." The satisfaction in her voice was unmistakable as she agreed to meet at my trailer that evening at 7th Sict. She insisted on bringing her full HOA board to witness our community resolution, which meant the FBI would have multiple targets to prosecute. That evening felt like the longest of my life. As I waited for Clarissa's arrival, 20 FBI agents were positioned around my property, hidden in the woods with night vision equipment and tactical gear. Agent Hayes sat in a surveillance van parked behind a grove of pine trees, monitoring my audio feed and coordinating with the tactical team through encrypted radio communications. I tried to stay calm by reviewing the architectural plans for Emily's cabin, reminding myself why this fight mattered so much. The property wasn't just land to me. It was the physical manifestation of every dream Emily and I had shared during our 12 years together. Clarissa arrived exactly on time with an entourage that looked more like a hostile takeover than a community meeting. She brought her 3 intimidation specialists from our first encounter, plus 2 additional men who looked like private security contractors. Behind them came what she called her HOA board, though FBI surveillance had already confirmed these were paid actors hired to create the illusion of community support. The group approached my trailer with the confidence of people who'd played this scene many times before and always merged victorious. Clarissa carried a leather briefcase that presumably contained purchase agreements and other documents needed to complete my surrender. Mr. Cole Clarissa began with the same fake warmth I'd learned to despise. "I'm so pleased you've decided to embrace," Community cooperation over individual stubbornness. The Pine Ridge HOA is prepared to be very generous in helping you relocate to a more suitable property. She opened her briefcase and spread official-looking documents across my trailer's small dining table. The purchase agreement was for $150,000, nearly $30,000 less than I'd paid for the property just months earlier. When I asked about the below market price, she launched into a detailed explanation that was music to the FBI's ears. Well, there are substantial environmental remediation costs that need to be factored in, Clarissa explained while the recording equipment captured every word. Pinnacle Development has conducted extensive soil testing and found contamination issues that will require expensive cleanup procedures. She went on to describe a completely fabricated environmental assessment that had supposedly found heavy metal contamination requiring $100,000 in remediation work. Every word was a clear admission of fraud, conspiracy, and criminal misrepresentation. She couldn't resist boasting about her previous successes in Texas and Nevada, where she'd helped resistant property owners understand the benefits of community cooperation. Most damaging of all, Clarissa revealed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. "Between you and me, Ethan, this Clearwater Lake project is just the beginning," she confided while leaning forward conspiratorially. "We have similar operations planned in 6 other states with a total development value of over $200 million. The key is understanding that individual property rights are obstacles to larger community prosperity." She even bragged about the deep fake technology they'd used against me, describing it as quite convincing and explaining how they'd gathered footage from security cameras to create their digital forgery. That's when Agent Hayes gave the signal that brought 20 armed FBI agents out of the darkness like avenging angels. "FBI, nobody move." The tactical team surrounded my trailer with military precision, their night vision equipment and tactical lights turning the peaceful lakefront into something resembling a war zone. Clarissa's face went through a remarkable transformation as she realized she'd been trapped, cycling from confusion to anger to terror in the space of about 10 seconds. Her hired intimidation squad immediately dropped to the ground with their hands visible, clearly experienced enough to know when a situation had gone beyond their pay grade. "Clarissa Wynn, also known as Claire Watson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of federal racketeering statutes," Agent Hayes announced while approaching with handcuffs. But Clarissa wasn't ready to go quietly. As the handcuffs clicked into place, she turned to me with a look of pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've just destroyed," she snarled through gritted teeth. "This operation employs hundreds of people across a dozen states. You think stopping me will make any difference?" Agent Hayes smiled grimly as she led Clarissa toward a waiting FBI vehicle. "Actually, we've been conducting simultaneous raids in 6 states tonight. Pinnacle Development CEO was arrested in Phoenix 2 hours ago, and their CFO was taken into custody in Denver. Your entire network is finished." The look of shock on Clarissa's face was worth every sleepless night she'd put me through. Robert Wynn had been arrested at his home simultaneously with our sting operation, caught with evidence of multiple arson attacks and a detailed list of future targets as the last FBI vehicle disappeared into the darkness. I stood alone on my property for the first time in months without feeling like I was under siege. The silence was profound after so many weeks of constant tension and conflict. Looking out at Clearwater Lake under a canopy of stars that Emily would have loved, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing from my life since her death. But Agent Hayes had warned me that criminal networks this sophisticated often have backup plans. And as I prepared for bed under FBI protection, I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be just the end of the first chapter in a much longer story. 6 months later, I stood in federal court watching Clarissa Wynn receive the longest sentence in recent history for real estate fraud conspiracy. Judge Patricia Morrison didn't hold back in her sentencing remarks, describing Clarissa's crimes. A systematic assault on the American dream of home ownership that destroyed dozens of families across multiple states. The final tally was staggering. 12 years in federal prison, plus $750,000 in restitution to be divided among her victims. Pinnacle Development's assets had been frozen and liquidated, generating over $50 million for a victim compensation fund that would help rebuild the lives Clarissa had systematically destroyed. The courtroom was packed with people whose lives had been shattered by Clarissa's fraudulent schemes. Jenny Miller sat in the front row with her 2 children, tears streaming down her face as she finally saw justice for the home she'd lost in Texas. 3 years earlier, Tom Bradley, the Afghanistan veteran who'd been Clarissa's most vulnerable target, had traveled from Austin to witness her sentencing. His testimony during the trial had been particularly powerful, describing how losing his grandfather's property had triggered a downward spiral that cost him his marriage and nearly his life. Now, with his share of the restitution fund, he was planning to buy back a piece of land near his original family property and start rebuilding his shattered existence. The ripple effects of Clarissa's conviction extended far beyond individual victim compensation. Colorado had fast-tracked the Property Rights Protection Act through the state legislature, creating strict penalties for HOAs that attempted to impose authority over properties outside their legal boundaries. The new law included provisions for triple damages in cases of fraudulent fines and criminal penalties for government impersonation schemes. Other states were following Colorado's lead, recognizing that homeowner associations needed stronger oversight to prevent future abuse of power. My own victory felt both personal and symbolic as I watched the cabin take shape beside Clearwater Lake. The structure was everything Emily had dreamed it would be, with solar panels gleaming on the roof and large windows facing the water to capture every sunrise and sunset. The foundation had been poured on the exact spot where Emily had stood 2 years earlier, pointing excitedly at online photos and describing how perfect the morning light would be for her art studio. Every beam and board felt like a promise kept, a tangible proof that love could survive, even death, when it was built on something as solid as shared dreams and unwavering determination. The construction process had become something of a community event, with neighbors who had initially shunned me during Clarissa's campaign now volunteering their time and expertise. Bob Jenkins from the hardware store had personally delivered materials and refused to accept payment, saying it was his way of apologizing for doubting my story. Mrs. Patterson brought homemade meals for the construction crew and helped design the native plant garden that would surround the cabin's foundation. The same community that Clarissa had manipulated into opposing me had transformed into a support network that understood the importance of protecting individual property rights against institutional overreach. Marcus Reed had become more than just a technical expert who'd helped expose Clarissa's deep fake fraud. He'd relocated from Seattle to Colorado, opening a digital forensics consulting practice that specialized in helping HOA abuse victims document their cases with courtroom quality evidence. His HOA Victims Toolkit website had become a national resource, providing template legal documents, evidence-gathering techniques, and connections to attorneys who specialized in homeowner rights cases. The site received thousands of visitors monthly from people dealing with similar situations, proving that Clarissa's crimes were symptomatic of a much larger problem in American communities. The personal transformation I'd experienced during this ordeal was as significant as any legal victory. Fighting Clarissa's criminal enterprise had forced me to discover reserves of strength and determination that I hadn't known existed since Emily's death. The grief that had once felt overwhelming and paralyzing had been channeled into something productive and meaningful. Emily's memory was no longer just a source of sadness, but a wellspring of motivation that pushed me to protect other families from experiencing the kind of loss we'd endured. The cabin wasn't just our dream home anymore. It was proof that ordinary people could defeat seemingly impossible odds when they had the right cause and the courage to fight for it. Agent Hayes had recommended me for a civilian advisor position with the FBI's white-collar crime division, helping to identify and investigate real estate fraud networks across multiple jurisdictions. The work was challenging and often heartbreaking, but It provided a sense of purpose that had been missing from my life since leaving my engineering career in Seattle. Each case we solved meant families who would keep their homes, veterans who wouldn't lose their grandfather's property, and single mothers who wouldn't be forced into homelessness by fabricated HOA violations. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Clarissa's first visit to my property, I stood on the completed cabin's deck, watching sunrise paint Clearwater Lake in shades of gold. That took my breath away. Emily's garden was thriving in the spot where I'd scattered her ashes with native wildflowers that would bloom every spring as a reminder of her enduring presence. A small bronze plaque near the garden entrance bore a simple inscription: Emily's garden where dreams take root. The words captured everything I'd learned during this long journey. From grief to purpose, from isolation to community, from victim to advocate. My phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Hayes that made me smile with anticipation. New case in Montana. Large-scale HOA fraud targeting Native American properties. Interested in consulting? I looked out at the lake, where Emily and I had planned to grow old together, feeling her presence in the morning breeze that rustled through the pine trees. The fight for justice was never really finished, but that was exactly what made it worth fighting. There would always be another Clarissa somewhere, targeting another vulnerable family, and there would always be people like me willing to stand up and fight back. If my fight against Clarissa taught me anything, it's that we're stronger when we stand together. Whether you're dealing with an abusive HOA, corrupt officials, or anyone trying to steal your dreams, remember that you have more power than you think. Your story matters, your voice counts, and there are people ready to support you. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing to Happer Stories for more tales of ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to fight back.